Why do you play video games? Is it because you like saving humanity from some type of crisis, or is it because you like just hanging out with your friends and enjoying it, having a good time? Well, both of those are really good reasons, and the Division 2 is supposed to have both of those in spades. The Division 2 base game's already been dropped all the way to $3 at one point, right in the anticipation of Warlords of New York. And yes, the expansion was $30, but that's a really cheap AAA game. Why is it that you can get this game for $3 at some points in time when it should be $25 to $45 still? Hey everybody, welcome to Ridir Gaming. I'm Wes, and today we're talking about the Division 2 and its recent expansion pack, Warlords of New York. But first, do me a favor. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite looting game is of all time and why it's your favorite. Because today we're going to talk about what makes the Division 2 a good game, what things detract from it, and how the devs can go through and make it a better game so you have more replayability in it. I've been trying to do this review for months, and I keep pushing it to just go down the road. The game is a good game. It's just not the game that I thought it would be, or really the game I want to play. And that's not to say that this is a game that you shouldn't play. I absolutely enjoyed most of my time, but I'm not going to say that I'm going to go back to this game. In fact, I don't think I'll probably ever pick it back up. So let's talk about what I really liked about this game and why I also think it got mired in its own ambition and what it can do to get back to that peak level of being a true AAA game worthy of our time and effort. To fully understand what the Division 2 is, you have to go back to the original Division game. And this game was set in New York City in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you had the dollar flu epidemic suddenly start up. And it turns out that a bioterrorist released a modified version of smallpox, and it just rips through the city and starts ripping through the population and starts destabilizing the country and parts of the world. So in response to this, the US government goes through and they activate the SHD network or the SHIELD network. And it's a whole bunch of basically individual units or individual people that go into the city and try and restabilize it and do all this other stuff. It's completely fanciful and it would never happen in real life, but it gives a good basis for a video game. Well, you go into New York City and it's cold and it's desolate and there's snowdrifts and there's nobody on the streets except for a couple stragglers trying to get warm. And then you get factions throughout the city and they start doing all their craziness and you have to retake the city. In the middle of the game's life cycle, it was horrible. It had almost no players. Nobody loved this game anymore except for the devs. And they brought it back from the brink of death. And they made a really good game out of it. There's a ton of content for it. There's a lot of different game modes. And it was fun. Then step back and Ubisoft and Massive announced the Division 2. The community goes, oh my goodness. They learned from their mistakes. They're resetting. It's step one. Right now, we got a new game and we're just going to go forward. Well, yes and no. But let's step back from there and start talking about what the Division 2 is. The Division 2 is set 6 months after the original events in New York City. You go into Washington, D.C., and you're trying to help reclaim Washington, D.C. Basically, the same thing happens again, just in a different city. You have factions throughout the city. They control different neighborhoods. You have to go reclaim them, except now you have settlements that you're trying to help people resettle within the city. This is a story of a flawed, beautiful game that could have really just been absolutely phenomenal, but it got mired in its own ambition. So let's go talk about some of that. As we dive into the game's design, it's actually very simple. It's a shooter looter. Players go through, they get loot, they get more powerful, they go to harder content. Well, players also have to go from level 1 to 30, and then once they get to max level at level 30, they have to go to World Tier 1 through World Tier 5. Okay, why didn't they just call it additional levels? Well, it's all based on the power level of the gear. It's not really based on the player level so much, it's what gear level they can get. So progressing from level 1 to level 30 lets you get stronger gear. Progressing from World Tier 1 through World Tier 5 lets you get even stronger gear. Warlords of New York increase the gear max level up to 515. That's fundamental. That's shooter looter or looter games in general. They all behave this way. Okay, I can deal with that. As a shooter looter, this game relies heavily on guns and skill sets. The guns are actually pretty plentiful with a vast array of different guns in a whole bunch of different categories. And then you have a bunch of skills that range from healing you, providing more armor, attacking the enemy, or being protective. There's a lot of different playstyles around the core gameplay that are available. And I think players will have a great time transitioning between all the different playstyles. One of the main aspects of the Division game though is cover. And the game is designed for players to take cover, to use a key to actually get into cover, press it, and then they are suctioned against that cover, and that's what they want to do. And this system doesn't always work all that great. One thing about cover is that it makes movement excellent, but it also traps you there and is kind of really annoying. Because movement from cover to cover is snappy and you can go very quickly from one spot to the next, it makes sense that this would be the basis of their movement model. But at the same time, if you're doing anything else besides cover to cover movement, it's sluggish, it's slow, it doesn't feel right. It feels like you started day drinking way too early, and it's just not conducive to fun gameplay if you feel like you're slogging through the streets of Washington, D.C. And put on top of that, taking cover actually feels pretty optional. I'm not saying that cover is optional in this game. I'm saying taking cover, or the action of actually snapping into cover, is optional. And that is because players have to use geometry to take cover in order to manipulate the enemy AI into basically not attacking smartly. And this is where, once the enemy AI is reworked a little bit, this whole system could be a ton of fun. I will say that the gunplay is fun while leveling, but at higher levels, it can get a bit tedious. It's not always fun to have to unload an entire magazine into somebody that's not even wearing a shirt because they have so much body armor and health. I would never say it's really that hard outside of the raids, but certain situations take some forethought into how you want to funnel the enemies towards you, because that way they just all come in one straight line and you can just keep your finger down on the trigger. Now, we had talked about gear level before, and gear level comes with 3 base stats and then a whole bunch of other stats. And, well, you really need an Excel spreadsheet to figure out what the best gear is for your character. But that's a whole nother story about how you can take the fun out of gaming. Players can build to their strengths and playstyles. I mean, there's just so much gear, an insane amount of variables, and you can never guarantee god rolls. I mean, you have armor damage, skill, power, 3 main attributes, which increase player durability, the weapon damage, or the skill power. Additionally, there's gear sets, and there's bonuses, and companies with bonuses, and then individual stats per gear piece. And players need a huge Excel sheet just to figure out what the best item and slot is. As players roam the city, they run into a bunch of NPCs. The enemies are split into different factions, and they control different neighborhoods throughout the city. And these guys all basically are variations of the same 3 categories: ranged, heavy, and melee. The melee NPC's job, with or without shields, is to run up and stagger the player, knock him out of cover, so that the ranged guys can actually do all the damage. The ranged NPCs, they all come with rifles, SMGs, or snipers, and their job is to just do damage. Now the heavy guys, these heavy guys are a pain because they wear a ton of body armor, they sprint as fast as the player does, they have miniguns, or they have these sledgehammer axe things, and they're just super villains to say the least, and you have to break their armor in one spot, and then they just drop as fast as anybody else does. So playing while leveling and advancing the world tiers, there isn't much amiss. The game's smooth. Players can develop their style and either play with friends or solo. Skill sets and weapon choice vary enough that it's very easy to do either. The map design's both unique and familiar, and it's fun to go through Washington, D.C., and you see the outbreak of the deadly virus, and you see how the city's overgrown, and parts are collapsing after hurricanes, and what should be a neat and orderly city has a little bit of a savage edge. And the map gets split into those several neighborhoods, and it's associated with the different gangs and all the tasks relating to the removal. And each faction should also drop very specific loot. But that's a little hit or miss. Players move from the main mission to main mission, and working out of the White House as a base of operations and attempting to recover the city and provide security for the fledgling settlements. Those main missions progress the story, and side missions and activities provide additional resources, they provide additional fast travel and ways to unlock new gears and stuff like that. Those main missions, they all take place in different locations, and they take you all over the city. From the Air and Space Museum and the Smithsonian out to Roosevelt Island, you're just going all over Washington, D.C., kicking the enemy out of these really high-profile places and trying to recover goods and information, and you do a great job doing it. And those are fun. But the side missions get really repetitive. It doesn't matter who the enemy is, it's the same handful of missions everywhere in the city. It's just boring. Then players get to level 30, and they get to beat the last stronghold. And the map turns red. So players go through and they defeat every enemy on the map, only to have the entire thing turn red again immediately, undoing all progress that they had just made. And this would make sense if it changed the city and if it changed the main missions, but it doesn't. All it does is it resets the mission and puts a new enemy in there with a few new units, and now you've got to run the exact same mission in the exact same way. You know that elevator that broke the first time? It's broken again. It breaks at the same point and it breaks in the same way. Once again, I'll go through and say this. The World Tiers feels like the story and the gameplay tried to get meshed, it didn't work, and all it did was make players feel like their time and effort was wasted. This is week after week because no matter what you do, these guys keep coming back to invade some portion of the map every week. And I get that the devs want to put in content that would bring players back week after week, but this isn't the way to do it. This is, in fact, the wrong way to put reoccurring content into a game because it makes the player feel like everything they've done is pointless. There's no sustainable progress. In fact, all the settlements that players have gone through to help build up get blockaded and you can't even use them. You can't go see anything. There's nothing productive about helping these settlements. And of course, there's the Forgotten Dark Zones that we can't leave out of the review, although most players have forgotten they even exist, because unlike the original Division game where it was almost a fifth of the map was the Dark Zone and it was a single unified long stretch of the map, you have 3 small potion stamps. There isn't a lot of room for lower power players to run around and be able to outmaneuver and extract from, so what's the point for them to go up against meta players? It's not really worth it at all. And then the last thing before I get back into the positives is the grind. And I'm going to do a whole video about how the grind in shooter looters is done incorrectly today, because the grind in this game was done in such a way that it takes the fun out of it. Yes, if I want to go get gear, I have to go grind these missions and waste a bunch of time instead of grinding the high-end content like the in-game raids. Now, that's not to say that the story is bad. In fact, the story is very good. If you're a Tom Clancy fan at all, I truly enjoy the story behind The Division. I think that it parallels, say, Rainbow Six very well. And in fact, the best loot in this game to me is the loot for the collectibles, the stuff that you find that tells the story of the individual characters, the individual people that have been left behind in the city, or they had to watch their family perish, or it's the behind the scenes and how the gangs are breaking down and how the factions are at war with each other. It's really good storytelling mechanics, and it's all located within the game. You can figure out everything that happens within the Division and the Division 2 within the collectibles inside the game and piece it all together. But let's talk about some of the really good stuff. And first off, we have the graphics. And I have to say, The Division 2 is a beautiful game. This is one of the best looking games I have seen. Although I miss the wintry streets of New York City and fighting through the blizzard and survival, I have to say that the game is still fun and beautiful based on just wandering the city and seeing the deer and the dogs, and I get to pet a dog. You go through and you see vines growing off trees and you see grass growing up and you see how the hurricanes and the earthquakes have gone through and messed up some of the garages. Like, it's done well. I mean, the environments are vast, they're diverse. There's the White House and there's sewers, there's Roosevelt Island Forest, and then you get into the Pentagon and Kinley College. It's all well mapped out, recreated, and it's got that little bit of a brush of slightly overtaken by nature. And it doesn't matter if you're on a PlayStation or Xbox or a PC, it still looks beautiful. Another essential element of The Division 2 is the audio, and there's 3 different aspects to the audio. There's the background noise, the atmospherics, and then the special effects. And the atmospherics are really, really good. I mean, it just sets the city where it actually feels like it's a city. It doesn't feel like a blank canvas. It feels like there's actually things happening behind you. You can hear gunfights from such a long way away, or you can hear deer walking through the streets, or you can hear dogs barking, or you can hear people talking. There's a ton of different ambience things that are there, and they're all very well done. And then you have the background music, and most of the time it's there and it's playing and you can hear it. And if you get into a gunfight, it ramps up. And if you get into a boss fight, it ramps up even more. And it's just awesome. And it just gets you going, and then it kind of ebbs down once the fight's over and everything evens out. And then they've got the emotional music for all the cutscenes, and it's just great music. I mean, it won't win a Grammy, but it is great music to help set the tone and put the emotional piece into this game.
Let's go back to Haven. I didn't expect another attack so soon. You okay? If this keeps
And then you have the sound effects, and the sound effects are superbly well done. I mean, this is Ubisoft, and they spent the money on doing the sound effects. They had the gunfire done right. They have the grenades done right, the gas, the explosions, fire. I mean, the whole thing. They've got rain, and they've got torrential downpours of rain, and it sounds great. And you can hear the bullets smacking into the wall. This is a game that they didn't spare money on audio, and it shows because you can feel the tie-in, and it feels better because of the way the audio sounds. There's actually a fourth category within audio, and that's voice acting. And a lot of the NPCs are voice acted, especially the main players in the story, and they're really well done. You can feel emotional weight, and these aren't just people they grabbed off the street. These are legitimate voice actors, and it feels good, and the scripts are good, and you can feel emotional weight. Except for the protagonist. The player's actual protagonist doesn't talk at all. And it can actually be emotionally distracting because you go through all these emotional speeches from all the other NPCs, and then the protagonist just nods and walks out of the room. What are you talking about? Like, this doesn't make sense, Ubisoft. Massive? Why didn't you have 2 or 4 or 6 voice actors come in and do the male and female lines? It's not like our decisions have any bearing on the story. It's the same decision every single time. It's the same lines. You could have had people voice act it and just made the game so much more immersive that way.
Say that you're more than welcome to stay. We still need your help, and New York is safer with you here.
Thank you.
The sad truth is, Directive 51 turned out to be necessary. I hate saying it, but there it is. So thanks, agents, for deworming the...
And this brings us to the end game. For hardcore players, there's PvP in the Dark Zone, and for PvE players, there's up to 8-player PvE raids. These raids really turn the corner and start to implement mechanics into the fights, so if you're coming from WoW or anything else that takes teamwork and you have to do mechanics to actually get through the raids, this is what you're looking for. You're not looking for the normal challenging missions or heroic missions. You're looking for the actual raids. Once again, enemies are bullet sponges, but massive promises that they're doing something to figure it out. Again, the one caveat to in-game is that it's going to require some type of voice chat option. And this is either going to be your in-game voice chat or your external voice chat. Yes, you can try typing, but it just takes too long to type, whereas you can actually talk and shoot and move at the same time with voice chat. A lot of players use Discord voice chat more often than an in-game voice one, so they don't have to talk to people randomly in-game either. For parents out there that are thinking about this game, it's available on PlayStation and Xbox, and those systems have their parental controls. That should be a little bit of a peace of mind. On PC, it's a bit more complicated because you have to use Microsoft's Family Group, and that's just kind of a pain in the butt. I'm not going to lie. There are built-in profanity filters, but the whole thing of having to go through Microsoft Family Group for any type of parental control is just not a good system. That being said, The Division 2 is a very mature game. You have death, you have drugs, you have sex, you have murder, you have political intrigue and backstabbing. I mean, there's a lot of different things that happen in this game that are not for young kids. They're not for young teens. If you want to have your 15 or 16-year-old play this game and talk to them about why things are happening at a political level or at a socioeconomic level, sure, absolutely. But there's a lot of different things that are built into this game that are great talking points and bridge builders to help explain how different people think and rationalize. And this is because you have different factions within the game that have different reasons for what they want to do. You have the True Sons who are political ideologists, and they want to have some type of very fascist state, to say the least. And then you have the Rikers who break out of prison, and you have criminals, and you have people that are anarchists, and you have fascists, and you have military type people that are trying to reestablish control. I mean, it's all these different mindsets trying to take control of the city and implement what they think is the best system for everybody. So if you're ready to have those conversations with your kid, sure, you can play this game with them. It'd be a great opportunity to go through and play this game. But did the Division 2 figure it out? Well, no, not really, but it's not for trying. They did the graphics, they did the audio, they did the voice acting, they did a lot of the original gameplay very well, but they got really ambitious and they mismanaged the gear, they mismanaged the levels, and they mismanaged the grind versus the fun. Instead of making the game where it's fun, they made it where you had to play it their style and their way, which was super grindy. There were times when I found myself wandering through DC, just looking at how beautiful it was and shooting a couple random NPCs and having fun that way. But at the end of the day, that didn't get me anything. It didn't give me loot. It didn't give me anything fun. It didn't give me any type of reward for just going through and knocking out enemies throughout the city. The gameplay is also somehow less fluid and clunkier than the Division 1, and it's missing game modes, it's missing survival, it's missing skirmish, it's missing a bunch of different stuff that's just not there, and I don't know why. For me, the biggest detractor of this game is the fact that the gameplay and the story don't mesh. They just don't come together. And I think this is because somehow somebody equated doing a grind makes more sense and is more fun than actually going through and playing the game how players want to play it. Do I recommend this game? At $3, I recommend this game. It has a great story and it can actually be a lot of fun. But if you're looking for a game that you're going to play time and time again ad nauseum for the next 6, 8, 9, 12 months, no, I don't recommend it. And do I recommend picking up the expansion pack? I would wait. I would wait on Warlords of New York. I would wait until it's part of some type of collection because it's a setup piece. It's like watching Star Wars Episode 8. You know Star Wars Episode 9 is coming around the corner and you know that's got to answer everything. So Episode 8 is just going to leave me hanging with a bunch of questions. For anybody that's asking for like a star review, I would give this a 3 out of 5 stars. It's not a bad game. It's a very polished game, but it's not a robust day after day type game. Hey, I had fun with The Division 2. I really did, but now it's time for me to go play something else. And in fact, you can watch me play every Wednesday and Friday night from 9 to 11 Eastern on Twitch, link down in the description below. But if you have any questions or concerns, you can always leave those in the comments down below. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram. I've got those links down in the description. And yeah. This has been Wes from Ridir Gaming. I'm going to grab my controller and game on, and we'll see you next time. This whole thing just seems contrived now. Nope, not having it. Not feeling it. I'm good. Next game.